Hi, this is Ashley Feraude, and you're listening to People Stories, the podcast about the people behind the professions. This, in fact, is my very first podcast, so I'm very excited to be sharing my conversation with you that I've had with Michael Liu. Michael Liu is a musician, a DJ, a bartender, a fashionista, and a cultural champion, amongst many, many other things. So how does he juggle all these things? Well, you're about to find out. This podcast has been made possible thanks to Mercedes-Benz in Canberra, a team at Fishwick who have been very supportive of this project. So I hope you enjoy the very first podcast of People Stories. Michael Liu.
Yes.
Welcome to the very first ever People Stories.
Thank you for having me.
I hope it's just as much of a special occasion for you as it is for me. But we'll see. You're taking a sip of the whiskey there, I can see, just to get in the mood.
Absolutely. A little bit of a liquid, or just liquid, really.
Just liquid, that's what you need, yes. Maybe I shouldn't be telling people that you're having whiskey. They might be listening to this in the morning and it might seem a little bit odd, but hey.
It makes me think about the first time that you did home stories with me, and a good chunk of that article is about how strong the gin and tonic was that I gave you.
Yeah, it was mostly gin with a touch of tonic.
Yeah, it was a good time.
So, just the listeners will probably want to know who you are. Not everybody, despite you being quite a celebrity in Canberra, might know who you are. So do you want to kind of just quickly introduce yourself and what it is that you think you do?
That actually makes me think of a T-shirt that I saw in Braddon yesterday, which says "I'm big in Canberra." I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. So what do? My name is Michael Liu. I am the head of communications for the placemaking and cultural development organisation Dionysus. Mm-hmm. And on the side, I'm also a musician and DJ, so a violinist, and then I'm also let's say quite a diverse DJ, but known for my So Fresh cheese. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
And the cultural agency, the placemaking and so forth. Can you talk about, just for those who might not know what the agency does, what are the kind of things they might be familiar with as far as Canberra goes? So
the word is placemaking, and placemaking is about activating public spaces through meaningful programming and actually creating meaningful connections between people and places, you know. Mm-hmm.
And specifically, I mean, most of the things that you do are in Canberra, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much all in Canberra. And I think New Acton's a really good example. We're based in New Acton, and we do all the cultural programming for New Acton. So everything from spontaneous jazz concerts to slam poetry to very cute kids' cushion concerts in the Grand Stair to our weekly wine market. It's all about activating those public spaces and doing it in the public realm, so that.
We might have to tell everybody here there's two doggies running around who are very, very, very excited.
My dog, who's probably more of a celebrity than I am.
That's very true.
Which is not hard. Frida, very cute cavoodle. And yours?
It's Pepito. They're actually both roughly about the same age.
Yeah, that's right.
Boy and girl. So they're having a date and a play right now. And it's pretty incredible. So if you hear a lot of that rustling and panting, it's not Michael and I. Yeah. It's the dogs, I promise. But yeah, just going back quickly. So I think people would probably recognize things like Art Not a Part. Yeah. I mean, that was quite an institution and still is. There's a lot of events that you do in Civic in terms of activating Part.
Right. So we're the city place manager. So Lavana, one of our colleagues, is the city place manager, and she's tasked with keeping the city cool. And that's we're talking about the Canberra CBD in particular, and that's sort of Braddon all the way down to where the lake is. And that's everything from bringing in some greenery and putting in great cultural events in Greenwood Place, to putting the park benches through Braddon so that there are places for people to actually stop and just enjoy a busy sidewalk, you know, without, it's the places in between destinations that we're looking at, you know, activating.
So, I mean, it's interesting the way that I tend to think of the agency that you work for, and I think this is what probably people will find quite interesting too, is you kind of working between various spaces. One is almost like the art scene.
Yep.
And you definitely work with a lot of artists, and you have a lot of artists working with you on a lot of these engagements and events. The other side of it is this kind of social space that you talk about, where you're about bringing communities and people together and kind of activating spaces and bringing them to life. And you said cool before, and kind of having that element. Another part of it is, I guess, maybe the festival end, the entertainment component. Yep. And somewhere between all of that, plus probably a lot of other things thrown in, is where you're at. So I'm presuming, am I right to say that what you do is obviously in the creative cultural space?
Yeah, I guess so. So we call it cultural development, and that's about developing a unique cultural identity for Canberra, you know. A lot of it is about not replicating things that happen elsewhere, but actually creating a cultural landscape for ourselves that is uniquely Canberran. I guess a lot of people that work in placemaking, they come from a design background.
Yeah.
You know, landscape architects, town planning, urban planners. Whereas Dave and myself, Dave Caffrey, who's the founder of Dionysus, it also happens to be one of my best mates. Dave's from a philosophy background. I'm from a musician / marketing background, I suppose.
Yeah.
So we come from a very different angle, and I think that's what sort of gives us that. Not a unique edge, but that's what sets us out from everybody else. Yeah. So we really care about the cultural programming. And though we might not be design experts, we are innately very tapped into how people move through a space, how people move through a festival, you know, the positioning of the stage to where the audience is, and just all those little things that perhaps... people that come from design background and approach placemaking might not think about.
I don't mean this as a competitive question, but is there anything or anyone or any organization in Canberra that's doing more or less the same thing that you are? Because to me, it seems quite unique.
I guess so. I guess we've positioned ourselves in a unique place. I mean, there's lots of fantastic event management companies in Canberra. You know, Damsel and Sprout, and you've got Show Pony, and there's plenty of great urban planners and town planning people. But people that particularly do what we do, probably not, I would say.
Okay.
More cultural development led and based placemaking.
Yeah. Do you love what you do?
I absolutely love what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the old adage? You know, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, blah, blah, blah. It's not a chore, though it can be really hectic and stressful, and sometimes we don't leave the office until 4 a.m. because the festival's the next day. It's still so enjoyable because a lot of the time in the events landscape, you know, you work for 6 months so hard, and then it's just this explosion of one big event. And for me, that's really rewarding, I think, seeing... You know, I'm happy to work on something for a very long time, but the actual enjoyment of it is so short. But the impact is so lasting and so long because it affects the community in such a powerful way. So, yeah, I absolutely love what I do.
And the reason I'm asking that question is, maybe I'll go back a little bit. When you and I first met, it was when I was looking for somebody to play along with. This is for my DJ sets, required an instrumentalist. I think somebody recommended you. I looked you up. You had a particular flair about you. And I thought, this could be kind of cool.
Yeah, Trinity Bar?
Yeah.
Is that the first one? Yeah, Trinity Bar.
And the interesting thing is, you know, there wasn't at that point at all anybody doing kind of a lot of live stuff with DJs, nor was there the situation where there was especially someone on violin doing it. In fact, I would hazard to say that violin wasn't actually cool at that point. In other words, people would think, oh, that's a classical instrument.
Absolutely.
How does that even work with
I think I still get that now. I think I tried to bring up playing violin at somewhere that I played the other day, and they're like, "Oh, violin in a pub." I was like, "No, trust me,
this will work."
You know, so I was classically trained back in my hometown of Townsville, but pretty early on, these dogs are having an absolute field day.
I know, they're having a great time.
But pretty early on, I realised that I wanted to use the violin in a different way. in a really modern way. And that, at the end of the day, it's just a voice like any other. And, the violin has always been something that people picture me with, and I'm absolutely okay with that, because it's almost like an extension of my arm. There are purists, obviously, that are horrified when I'm not playing Bach, but instead I'm playing, Taylor Swift, Shake It Off. But I think, the violin is a absolutely universal and timeless instrument, and why shouldn't we modernise it? And it's a fantastic way, especially for when young kids see it. It really inspires them to pick it up.
And it became quite the point of difference. And I mean, you and I started playing, and we did a lot of gigs, you might remember, back at East Hotel at some point.
Yep.
And we kind of became...
the Ox Eatery.
Yeah, that's it. And we became friends out of that. And I think what's interesting, though, is... And I'm kind of getting to something here. I think... Right from the start, I kind of figured you had a particular creative streak about you, right? And at that point, I didn't really know whether... I knew you were studying at ANU, but I had no idea what it is. I presumed it was music. And, you kind of turned up and you would have these pocket squares in your blazer. And I remember thinking, this guy's quite dapper. Maybe I should get some. I did, because I'm competitive, started getting those kind of things as well. But where I'm going with this is the real big surprise to me at that point was when I asked you what you were doing after a few months of us playing together, and you said, I'm doing economics.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was thinking, right, okay, well, that's not what I was expecting you to say. And then as we got to know each other, I asked you, so, when you finish up, because at some point you said, I've only got like some period, 6 months or something. And I said, so when you finish up, what's next? So getting a suit and going to an economics job? And you went, nah.
No, definitely not.
And then your answer at that point was, I'm thinking marketing. And so this is the thing I wanted to know. It almost seems like clearly before you even started studying, you had this creative streak in you, which ultimately led you down the path of doing what it is that we're doing now, which is creating creative things for the society around us, specifically Canberra. But that clearly wasn't the plan, and that really wasn't, I would say, on the cards, at least in your own planning from the start. So at which point did you kind of think economics isn't for me? I should do something else and start kind of following that calling, which ultimately took you to where you are now.
Yeah, right. Well, I moved from Townsville to come here for ANU, also because I don't deal very, very well with the heat. So I really like Canberra for its cold. I started with economics law, that changed to just economics, and then I changed to commerce.
And did you want to be an economist and a lawyer at that point?
No, I don't know. I think I just wanted to get a business foundation, I felt like that was the right thing to do. But what that really taught me was that what I wanted to do was still be in that space, still be in a business space, I suppose, but it had to be creative because economics was just, everything was quantified.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's absolutely no leeway whatsoever. And so obviously taking a few marketing courses through the commerce degree, I found that marketing was such a perfect, it's that bit between the two Venn diagrams, between that corporate business world and creativity.
And you wouldn't now, in hindsight, it's easy to make these kind of judgments, but at the time when you finished economics, were you thinking, did I just waste however many years of study?
I guess not. A lot of during uni, I was pretty lucky to have worked a stint in the press gallery, and then I worked as a staffer for a senator. So I had a lot of a really diverse sort of professional experience at that point. And then, as you would know, I was starting to work on the first 2 years of Fash Fest. So I was starting to do some event stuff as well.
Yep.
So I don't feel like that time was ever wasted. If anything, if I hadn't gone through that process, I would never have reached where I am now.
Yeah.
You don't lose if you learn. Right?
Yeah. So if you had your way and you could modify the past, would you still take the same path, or do you think you would have undertaken a different degree or a different way of approaching this?
That's a really tough one. If I could have a couple of goes, I've always thought that I would love to give music a shot, especially at uni, because I never studied at uni.
So more so than you've already given it a shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
To actually study it, because I'm not, though I was classically trained through school, and I did some of my grades and I got my diploma, I never studied it at a tertiary level. And one of the main things that held me back was because there wasn't really a contemporary violin course that I could step into. It was all classical based. Yeah. And there weren't a great amount of, I mean, there were jazz violinists, but I just wanted to be, I wanted to be the violinist that, I don't know, the Black Eyed Peas would call on stage. I wanted to be that guy that just played all sorts of stuff. I mean, since that time, in this 10 years that I've been here in Canberra, violin's a lot cooler now than it ever was. With people like Lindsay Sterling on YouTube, and an absolute litany of people that play violin, hip hop violin on America's Got Talent and things like that. Yeah. It's gotten much cooler. So it's not so much the black sheep of the instrument family, because trumpet's always been cool. Sax is obviously, the top of the pyramid.
Sax kind of after the 80s heydays.
Yeah.
It kind of dropped back, but then you take the last 10 years and it's been the sexiest.
Yeah, and it's come back. I mean, I think if you go to Kokomo's any Saturday, you will see a sax man standing up on the subwoofer, absolutely blowing.
A riot.
Yeah, to the nth degree.
That's very true.
When there's a violinist in every pub doing the same, that'll be the day.
So do you think, so just thinking of that, because you were talking about maybe if you had another go at it, you'd like to do that whole music thing almost full time.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, that if you did that and music became kind of the sole occupation, so to speak, the pressure of it being the breadwinner component of your life would maybe potentially take away from the enjoyment of it? And the fact that you're doing it the way you're doing it, where you do it as much or as little as you wish around obviously your work that you love anyway, is actually...
Side hustle. That's the word that I use, side hustle.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm interested by that because the reason why I didn't pursue music at uni was because, to be completely honest, I didn't want to have to practice 6 hours a day. That's what really put me off. But that's very much something that's connected to classical music, because you're playing something that's already written down.
Yeah.
Whereas what I wanted to, or still do now, is improvising, and it's all about honing your ability to adapt in the moment to whatever you're playing with. And in the absence of finding a course which sort of fit that, I sort of just let it become my side passion. If I swapped it, I mean, I was just talking the other day to a good friend of both of ours, Nick Rigby, and he's like, well, he's a professional musician, and he gigs all around town, and he still loves it.
Yeah.
But it just depends what sort of violin work I would have found. If it was in the, in the back seat of the Canberra Symphony Orchestra, I don't know if I could have kept up with them discipline-wise,
Yeah.
Practice,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the choices that we make, I think, might be in some way disappointing, and we think we've done them because we couldn't achieve something else.
Yeah.
But actually, when we look at our lives and kind of put into perspective, we realize that the choices we made probably have been a bit more intelligent than we thought.
Absolutely.
Just as a throwback, and I don't want to make this about me. This obviously is about you. But I had this period in my life where I got to the stage where I was headlining in the major club in Canberra. There were Sydney gigs coming up, the whole entire thing. I started producing my own stuff, and of course, while balancing a corporate career. And
you represented Australia in New York.
I did,
right?
yeah.
That's right. Yes. I used to look up to. So I still look up to. I'm not used to. I still do, especially because you still hold on to this side hustle.
That's just the whiskey kicking in. I'm sure. No, but it was one of those moments where I consciously had to think, do I want to make this a full-time thing? Yeah. And actually what scared me off wasn't practice, because in DJing there's less of that. It was the fact that I realized that perhaps the life of a full-time clubbing DJ would run short for me pretty quick. And I think there would be a point where I thought, you know what, I'm going to get over this. Yeah. I'll get over the nights, the flashing lights, the massive crowds, all the rest of it. Yeah. And then if that happens, what am I going to be left with? And that's the bit that made me make a decision, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pursue music and DJing and all the rest of it as much as I possibly can, but within this kind of controlled environment so that I don't ever have to rely on it completely. Yeah, and should the situation change that I don't fit what's required of a DJ or what have you, or I just don't enjoy it, I can drop it without, kind of thinking my life has ended.
Absolutely.
But it's only kind of really realized that many, many years later that I've kind of worked that out. At that time, I thought I was just being scared, and that's why I tried to make that decision. But it wasn't that. It was some bit of I don't know, intuition that said maybe this isn't a full-time thing.
And I think having any sort of creative pursuit as a side hustle, if you're not relying on it financially, you can take a break, and then absence makes the heart grow fonder. You know, you can take 6 months off, and then you can find that joy again when you know, have a hiatus, and that also, to a certain degree, makes people miss you too, especially if you're a regular weekly club DJ. Yeah. So yeah, we're in pretty lucky positions.
No, we are. No, it's very true. I didn't want my first podcast to be with somebody depressed about their career.
Yeah.
Even though that would be an interesting point to take. Success. I want to ask you about this. This is an interesting point. You know, quite often people talk about the success they have in their careers, or in the pursuits that they undertake. And it's interesting because if you think, you know, the first measure of success for most people is the money, essentially, whether, you know, you're doing that part of it well. Enjoyment is the second part, etc., etc. But realistically speaking, we all know there's different things to different people. Yeah. So how do you define success for yourself?
Well, pretty early on, I sort of developed my own idea. I'm going to be completely candid here. Sure. I developed my own idea that I wanted to pursue at least one of two things professionally, and that is either money or influence / impact to do good.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of column A, a bit of column B. You know, like I live comfortably, but also like I feel like the work that I do is really good. You know, we're putting Canberra on the map, and people enjoy our community events, and we're creating something for Canberra to be proud of. Success in the events world, which we're in, is very visceral and tangible, you know, because you see
when something works.
Yeah, but you see when something works. You see 15,000 people at Art Number Part all smiling, enjoying a crazy explosion of art. It can be somewhat harder when you're looking at the success of just, you know, as you would know, like just a Facebook post or something.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I got 100 likes today. But for the most part, I think because it's so easy to see the impact of the work that we do,
you get an instant reward out of that success. I was just going to ask also, I mean, for Canberra, let's just put it into perspective, you know, your social network's quite strong. And what I mean by that is not really perhaps, you know, by the number of followers you have, but rather the way that people engage with you.
Yeah.
And I know that because I can see that, you know, you make posts, you make statements, and sometimes they're political, sometimes they're about art, sometimes it's just about you, sometimes it's about your new brooch, whatever it may be, right? But the actual engagement to your content is quite high, which I would probably put down to the fact that A, people are in tune with what it is that you're about. Two, they probably think it's very authentic.
Yeah.
You're not really selling anything most of the time. And so is that kind of social influence important to you?
I think so. I think anyone enjoys when people listen, when you have something to say. And, you know, I don't, for example, Facebook, I'm really active on Facebook, and I don't treat it as something, you know, it's not just somewhere for me to, you know, just brain fart about. Yeah. You know, I actually do think about what I put out there, and I want to use it as a force for good. You know, if I have a couple thousand followers, friends on Facebook, then I'm going to want to talk about stuff that matters to me. Or even just, the lesser stuff, which is just posting something funny but positive that just brings, you know, a smile to someone's day.
So that comes down to that influence.
Yeah.
So whether it's on your social networks or whether it's the influence that you have through your work and what you guys do, that seems to be quite the important driver. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost seems like that's almost taking over the money component.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you want to be able to live well and so on, but that's not the aspiration within all of this. You don't want to be the richest promoter. No. If you know what I mean, that aspect of it. It's not about that. I don't want to go back to one thing that you mentioned before, and that's the fact that you work with Dave, Dave Caffrey. I think maybe would it be fair to say that meeting him and getting to know him, because I'm presuming, did he already have the agency when he employed you, or did you guys start that up together?
Dave had the idea of Dionysus. Dionysus was actually supposed to be a club, a multidisciplinary arts venue that would host everything from parties to poetry slams to exhibitions. And I think that almost happened, but then after his in-house work with Molongo Group as the events and cultural coordinator, that became this placemaking organisation. But I met Dave 10 years ago. I was a sprightly first year at ANU, and I saw a poster about a party society called Univibes, of which Dave founded. And essentially they were just a bunch of DJs that would play at the pub, play at the ANU Refect, and just put on parties and put on house parties and things like that. And I sent him, in my first year away, I sent him an email saying, hey, you've got a great society. Have you thought about incorporating live instruments?
Yeah.
And so we met at Teatro Vivaldi's, and we sat down, and I was like, hey, have you thought about putting some instruments with the DJs? Because I play violin and I love improvising, particularly with cool music, So
you were hustling, in other words.
Like techno and house. And he's like, no, I've never thought about that. And that was the end of it. From there, I think one of our first gigs was...
Or rather, the beginning of it.
That was the beginning of it. Yeah, absolutely. And I've been... Dave would, for the first, 4 or 5 years, when Art on a Putt was just starting, he'd call me up and be like, all right, let's start a band. This is the idea that I've got. And the amount of costumes that I've been put in, or the amount of bands that I've been thrust upon to lead, I couldn't even count. But that kept building and building and building until 4 or 5 years ago, when he was moving out of being in-house at Molongo Group, starting Dionysus as a placemaking company, as a company of one for him at that time. And he was like, hey, I'm looking for a marketing guy. And I think I was just finishing up as marketing manager of Parlour.
Yep.
Parlour and Elkin P.
Of course.
After doing a stint as manager of Knightsbridge. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
So we should probably just interject here and say that one thing that people might not know about you is your bar work.
Yeah.
Which you did a lot of at a quite a professional level, I should say, as well. So there was this other facet.
I don't know. Some people would probably refute
look,
that. Professional level.
In comparison to me,
sure.
Not knowing how to pour this whiskey for you. You definitely were working at a professional level because you were getting paid for it, and for a very long time, and you were part of that culture, and I knew that too. So there was also this definitely entertainment aspect that was definitely part of you. So there's another layer that kind of crept
absolutely.
in.
So after doing the stint at Press Gallery and being a staffer, and then after all the Fash Fest stuff happened, and I passed the reins over to you, I was looking for a new challenge. And my housemate at the time, Josh, was managing 90, and they were like, we're looking for an assistant bar manager. And then I'd never shaken a drink in my life. But I sort of knew that part of why he brought me in was also because he wanted me to
make his drinks.
Well, that, and also get an understanding of the music, and to try and sort of future-proof 90 for wherever it was going. It turns out that was heading towards So Fresh parties and cheese, but that sort of made sure that we kept going until now. So I managed Knightsbridge, and I was the last manager.
And when that finished up, that's when you essentially got the opportunity to work with Dave.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, what I'm interested in here is, see, if you look at your development, so to speak, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got always had this music behind you. There's always an entertainment component about you. You're definitely hustling to make that bigger. You obviously did economics and so forth, but it's the marketing that kind of was taking you. Then you're obviously proactively setting down foundations for where you got to, even with the fact of working at bars, which is a very public social thing, which teaches you not only how to react to people, but what makes them tick at that level, then ultimately seeking out Dave and so forth. A lot of it would seem like it was almost planned, if not completely consciously, right? But I guess meeting Dave might have been just a lucky fluke in many ways, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I would never have thought, if you'd told me when I sat down I think I was drinking mockers at the time because I was only 18 when I met him at Feraude's, that we'd be working together 10 years on, putting on Canberra's largest contemporary arts festival, or, putting on big warehouse parties in Fishwick, I would have said, or something that I can't say on this podcast.
No, well, you can. So then if you look backwards, how much do you think you shaped who you are right now, and how much of it was essentially by chance?
I think I really wanted to make sure that I had, in my 20s, a real diversity of experience. I wanted to make sure that I did a little stint in retail and selling suits, and then I did the shaking the drinks, and I did events and this and that. And I think I was just filling in my skill set so that whatever I ended up deciding that I wanted to do, which happens to be at this point, marketing cultural events, that I was prepared, or at least that I had enough life experience in not just a depth, but in a breadth of way, that I actually had multiple skills from, one-to-one chit-chat, selling drinks, to being able to deal with a senator, to a whole bunch of stuff. But as much as I planned that, I also just got. I think you just have to take every lucky break that comes your way, and I maybe, I bloody well did.
Well, this is one interesting, because I think there's these traits of many successful people, by different definitions that they have, is that they make opportunities or are ready for opportunities by having a wild field of interest. And I mean, I think what we're talking about here is a pretty good example of that, because I think what happens is a lot of us take on some pursuits that we might be interested in, then we kind of go, well, am I wasting my time learning this?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe in a positive sense, I'd like to think that anything you take on, even if that doesn't end up being your ultimate goal or profession, adds to the skill set that ultimately might make you see an opportunity that you could take up.
Yeah.
So even though you're saying that maybe it's a nice mix between you aiming for it and it kind of working out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being ready for it is a key.
And I think all skills are transferable. I mean, this is a very left of field example, but in design and stuff, they look to the animal world, right? So biomimicry, like looking at how ants nest and things like that. I feel the same way. Like, I may not have had the biggest marketing experience, but from taking my experiences dealing with people one-on-one, or DJing in front of a club of 200 or 300 or 400, I've used those skills and I've then transferred them into other applications. And so I've never really looked at those individual, quite specialized skills as in their own silo. I think you can use them in different ways.
Yeah.
At least that's how I sold it.
I think that's exactly right. If you could give yourself advice, in other words, most of this kind of last 10 years or decade of your life has been where all that stuff shaped. If there's one bit of advice, if you could go back in time and give yourself at that point, to either do nothing, just keep on going as you are, don't worry, on the right path, keep on doing all those different things because it's going to work out, or maybe a piece of advice that would have made that journey quicker, simpler, easier, whatever. Is there one particular moment where you would have gone, this is what I could tell you?
That's a tough one. I guess it would have to be something around studying smarter. Now that I'm, I'm a communicator like yourself, and I'm really into it. Like, I find myself reading journals. Like, I sit on the board of the IABC, which is this communications association, and I find myself reading Ad News Today and things like that. And I really enjoy it. Like, I really enjoy getting better at that. Whereas when I was studying commerce, I felt like it was such a chore.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what it is, but learning to develop your skills smarter, not harder, like not making it such a regimental, bogged down in textbook sort of way. So perhaps, definitely studying and working and professional development in a smarter way, perhaps through finding more creative ways to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think I was looking around and no one else cared, no one else minded when they had to read, half of a law textbook, but I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But maybe what I had to do was get Siri to read it out and listen to it as a podcast, or, find a different way. And I think looking back now, I really wish I could have told myself to explore other ways of getting the same information.
Yeah, and that would have been helpful because it would have made it easier. You might have picked up more things along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's a really good point. I want to ask about the sacrifice. Now, there might not be anything like this, but is there anything that you had to sacrifice in order to get to where you currently are at? So, for example, just to give you some context, I've got friends of mine who, had to move to another city to follow the career of their dreams. And what they had to sacrifice in that is some of the friendships and the development that they had back here. And even though they've kept it up, they've openly said, if I was back here, I would have those friends would be much stronger. It's just distance is difficult. Some of them had to kind of sacrifice a particular lifestyle that Canberra is relatively famous for in terms of being quite a lifestyle city. And none of them regret that. That's not what I'm getting at. But they're all conscious that there's a price to some of the decisions. In their particular cases, they were definitely the right ones. But they're quite open about that, But do you have any kind of thing like that?
Nothing quite so major. Perhaps it's more in my character. I mean, I think a lot of people find that I sacrifice my time a lot more than others would be willing to do. Even though you'd class as work, I do enjoy it, but, I work a lot at Dionysus. I work a lot playing violin and DJing and then just, end up doing other stuff, whether it be working on an event or giving advice or...
Sitting on a podcast.
Sitting on a podcast, But, I guess it's all about framing. I don't see it as a sacrifice. I would much rather be here drinking a lovely whiskey than at home folding my clothes.
I don't blame you.
I tend to, I don't really have a weekend, and you're probably the same, really. I sacrifice a lot of free time, but
it's not a regret. I think this is what I kind of wanted to get to, that sacrificing is in the sense of this, a conscious decision that you make to have a particular lifestyle because something else means a lot to you. And nothing comes without a price of some sort or another. It's just hopefully you can get the balance right. But, would you say you have the balance, in your stage of life? And if you don't mind me saying, you're 28?
28?
Yep.
I think that sacrifice is the wrong word because it makes it sound like you're not gaining anything.
Correct.
It's more like a trade-off. It's an informed trade-off whereby, I have thought about maybe I could stay in this Saturday night and get more sleep. Yeah. But, why? But then at the end of the day, the net benefit of going out there and working harder and pushing my side hustle while I can means more to me, So I get more out of it. I'm looking for that net benefit.
Yeah, and you're happy with that, right?
Absolutely.
That's what
absolutely.
It is. Yeah. And I think this
doesn't mean that it doesn't get stressful, but at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because it's, the outcomes are much more meaningful than had I got that extra hour of sleep.
And how do you, speaking of stress, how do you manage it? How do you...
Well, I'm a full-blown extrovert. The last person that I would want to spend time with is probably myself. So, my own company is probably the most boring company that I could think of. So I guess in a way, I'm just built to always be around people. So how do I deal with stress? I probably just hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
And they let me download on them, or it's just about just hanging out and just having a good time. I think just being around other people really, like this right now, is helping me a lot to de-stress about all the work that I had to do today in the office. That's not the same for everyone. I don't know if that's the same with you, but I think that's the difference between extroversion and introversion, right? Like extroverts recharge and gain their energy from being around other people, whereas introverts need their own recharge time. Like it's draining to be around other people, even if it is enjoyable.
Yeah. I sit on without making this into a psychology a lesson, which by the way I did psychology at ANU.
Yeah. You're going to send me the invoice after this, aren't you?
Just got to get the couch in here for you to lie down and tell me about your mother. The interesting thing is I sit on in between the extrovert and introvert, so I'm happy both ways. I can extrovert as I need to, but I also rethink a lot of situations and need kind of quiet time and all the rest of it. But just like you, I find the way to relax is by being quite true to the internal callings that I have. And the fact that, we're having this chat right now, I'm not thinking about a lot of the creative projects that I've got on at the moment. I probably will the moment we stop. But for me, this is a bit of space for me to get to know you. And therefore, I get to know a little bit about myself and kind of understand people. And that understanding is actually quite calming.
Now that we've actually spent this time talking about this, one of the things that I've realized is that something that's really benefited me is self-awareness. For some people, I know very well, and I've thought about it a lot, the fact that I am an extrovert, and what is going to do best for me. Literally when I'm by myself, I feel more tired. I feel restless. I don't feel like I'm getting the energy that I need. But I've also realized that over the last 10 years, both professionally and personally, I've spent a lot of time thinking about myself and trying to figure out my own, learning strategies and how I actually digest information, or the best ways that I engage, or the best ways that people find me engaging. So I think,
Do you think that's a life experience thing, or do you think that's a product of getting a little bit older?
I think a lot of people just plod along without much self-awareness of how they... without knowing themselves as well as they probably should. There probably shouldn't be anyone else that knows you better than you do. At least in my instance, where I'm still trying to hustle and get ahead and things like that. The fact that I know myself really well has helped that a lot.
And I'm presuming you're probably finding, maybe you're right, I am a little bit older than you, and I kind of tend to find that being comfortable in your own skin is a great quality, not only for yourself, but also the people around you, because you're less likely to be judgmental, you're likely to provide support and advice, you're a good sounding board for stuff,
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other side of it is, I think, once you've kind of attained understanding to whatever degree that you're happy with, I think there's an interesting part of it that you then realize that you're constantly changing too. Going back to psychology for one quick second, a lot of people would be familiar with that 16 personalities test. That
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah. If I did that, I did that test 10 years ago. I did it 5 years ago, and I actually changed on the scale for one particular personality to another one. And I know that it's not just because I answered incorrectly, because I did that test 5 times then, 5 times this time, and I always keep on getting the same answer across those 2 tests. It's just that I have evolved in the sense of changing as a human being based on the experiences that I have around me. Yeah. And I kind of weirdly actually quite like that. And I'm really interested to see what's going to happen to me and to you in 10 years' time. And if we have this chat, you're going to be in a different place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your sense of self-awareness will be a little bit different. Yeah. But I'm kind of hoping that you enjoy the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than being scared of that.
And I think it doesn't just, for things like Emily Taylor, I don't think it just measures character, it measures your personality skills as well. Yeah. And those things develop. And for everyone, they develop, especially, just like we've talked about, you learn different skills and that changes your personality in different ways because you figure out what you like about yourself more and you figure out what you like around the world, in the world more. So it's probably a good thing that it changes and that your results would change.
On that topic, what is the one trait that you like about yourself the most? And this is not blowing one's trumpet. It's one thing that you're most comfortable with and you think this is a really good trait of mine. And when I see it and when I look at myself doing this, I'm actually quite happy with my approach.
That I don't fear being passionate about something. I'm not scared to show that I love wearing my penis out badge, or that I love Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis, or that I think that's one of the things that is quite scary for some people, but it's something that's a real foundation of me, and that's I unapologetically love what I love, and I love sharing that with people. I think that if you're passionate about something, you should be able to share it. And people don't have to necessarily agree. And people can think it's absolutely lame. But, what's great about that is that you have a passion. And I think that's, to me, that's something that's really meaningful and important.
So on the flip side, what's a trait that you don't kind of like about yourself? It's like an interview, isn't it?
I think I rely on my intuition a little bit too much sometimes, particularly in a professional aspect. I jump to conclusions a lot quicker than I probably should. I don't analyze the options available. I use my gut feeling about certain things. You know, I could probably take a more measured approach to what I think will work and not work.
Yeah.
Definitely. But that, you know, I am a very strong person. I am a very intuition-based person, you know, like, and luckily, fingers crossed, that's been pretty good so far. But especially in things like marketing, I could definitely look at, you know, the data a lot more.
Yeah.
And, you know, take more time to get to the outcome or get to the final product. And actually assess more options.
I think, you know, you're probably not alone in this, though. I think what happens, and this is a trait of busy people in the sense of people who are trying to achieve a lot, is that they rely on their judgment quite a fair bit.
Yeah.
Because it's a shortcut to making a decision, which in most part is based on experience, some kind of knowledge, and ability to assess a situation quickly. But of course, it's not foolproof.
No.
The problem is that if you kind of go backwards and overdo the analyzation component, you're not going to be true to your intuition. And there's been all these tests done about how the intuitive kind of decision tends to actually be the correct one most of the time. Most of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So maybe the trick is, you know, that if you get it wrong, you have to be okay with that and actually move away from that problem or solve it very quickly.
Yeah, and perhaps it means that even if I have a gut feeling, that then I then go and look for the data that supports that.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't do that.
So it's not just an opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think the way that people perceive you, not at a close friends, in other words, people kind of in more general life, the way they perceive you is relatively true to who you are? Or do you think that there's a slight, I don't mean a negative sense, misjudgment, but a kind of different take on who you represent?
I think generally what you see is what you get. You know, pretty happy-go-lucky, pretty rambunctious, passionate. I'll tell you that I want to get, you know, the Phantom's mask tattooed as my first tattoo, or it's probably the more quieter, contemplative stuff. But I think that's the same for a lot of extroverted people. Yeah. That people wouldn't think about, you know, that I do when I get a spare moment, you know, do have my own quiet reflection and spend time ruminating on things. But in a lot of instances, when you do meet people or you bump into someone, there's not the opportunity to, you know, to really download about that sort of stuff. You know, it's just, oh, what have you been doing? Or how are you going? Or what's, you know, how's home? How's social life? How's your love life? How's work? Oh, great. I'll catch you, you know, in 6 months when I bump into you again. Yeah. So absolutely. Like, I think generally what you see is what you get with me, but,
do you care? Do you care what people think of you and your opinion?
Yeah, I have to say absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's okay.
So it's not that your kind of passion and your drive and essentially extroversion is in any way kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but like bolshy in the sense that, you know, someone says, well, I think that's stupid. You know, you don't like, or whatever, and you talk over them. So you've got a sensitive side.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely care what people think, and I'm always happy to have a debate about something.
So if an event, for example, were to fail, I'm sure it hasn't, but if it were, do you take it personally? Yeah. Or do you take it professionally and you're like, oh, well, something was wrong with the marketing? Or do you go home and it kind of wounds you a little bit because you're like, why the hell didn't that work?
Oh, especially with the way that we approach work at Dionysus, or even the way that I approach work with DJing and playing violin. Like, I prefer to not separate myself personally and professionally. Like, I am emotionally connected to everything that I do. I think that at least in the industry that I'm in, creates better results. You know, that I am personally invested in something, that I want something to personally succeed because I really believe in it. Yeah. And I completely understand that that's perhaps a luxury of working in a small startup in something that I really love doing. You know, if I was working for a government department, it might not be the same. And so, no, I do get pretty emotionally connected to things, and sometimes when things go wrong, I do take it pretty hard.
Yeah, it's interesting too because, you know, sometimes when I give advice, so in my corporate work, so to speak, that people might not know about, so this is in marketing direction, you know, sometimes I get people who get upset about particular situations at work, and sometimes the answer to that is, take the emotion out. Remember, this is work.
Yeah.
Look at it for the logic that it is. Yes, of course, you're invested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, no one's dying. This is marketing.
Yeah, sure.
And if an ad goes out with a spelling mistake in it, yes, people will get in trouble or there might be other repercussions of it. But essentially, everything's going to be fine in the long term.
Yeah.
So take that emotion out. But it's hard because when you've connected yourself personally to the work that you do, especially in your sense, where it seems the thread of creativity and music is actually very much not only a part of you, but the work that you do. It's hard because the emotionality is contained to that work, and it's probably very hard for you to kind of separate those two things out.
I think it's about, I mean, if you get upset because you're emotionally connected to something and it doesn't go well, one of the first things to remember is that it means that you care. And that's probably one of the most strongest and important things. Funnily enough, just yesterday, I did put a Facebook event out and it had a typo in it. When I found out half an hour later, I was absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
But A, it meant that I care. And B, I'm never going to bloody do that again. But it made sure, I just took it as a learning experience.
Yeah.
And it meant that I'm going to pass it through as many spell checkers as I can. So, I mean, again, case by case basis, I think. If I'm working on something that I don't necessarily agree with, you still have to give your 100% professional.
Yeah, of course.
Experience and judgment behind it. But, at least in my line of work, getting emotionally involved is
a plus.
So
would you say, as a person, and this is the interesting part of it, do you think in your case specifically, you're defined by the work that you do? In other words, you haven't met someone. I've got a new person that's come in here, and it's not Emily or the two dogs.
Yep.
And I go, hi, this is Michael. And I go, Michael works in the cultural agency. He's also a DJ and a musician, has some pocket squares.
Yeah.
Notice that my definition of you is very much attached to your professional endeavors.
Sure, absolutely.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And are you happy with that?
I'm absolutely happy with that because if I didn't make money from DJing and playing violin, I'd probably still do it.
Yeah.
And I'd wish that you would still introduce me as such.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about that professional connection, I think. Like, it very much is, and I'll always say that I'm in a luxurious position where I absolutely love what I do, both at work during the day and generally at nights, but also in my side hustle. So, it's exactly the same way that I introduce myself. And the things that I do at work or the work that I do says a lot about me. I mean, instantly when you're a musician, it means that you're performative. It means that you have a creative side. I mean, it reveals so much about the person, and the things that it reveals is generally true.
It's interesting. I mean, I'll just second that too, that obviously I DJ quite a fair bit still on the weekends, and I do it honestly because I love doing it. That's the main driver. What's interesting about it too is if I do a good set by my own standards, and specifically if people respond, they come up, they ask about songs, what have you. I feel so happy about the way that's defining me. But sometimes I have a bad set like anybody else. And if you do the hundreds that you and I do in a year, there are moments where I'm like, I'm just not getting this right tonight. This is terrible. Yeah. And somehow I'm embarrassed that people might judge me for playing that music, which is of course silly because I'm sure people don't. Yeah. But there is this self kind of awareness around the work that you do.
But it's as simple as you want to do a good job.
Yeah.
If you're going to do something, don't, we want to do a good job, but because doing it well makes it more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think that's the crux of it,
So what's next? So you know how you talked about self-awareness essentially, right? And now we've kind of made the connection that your profession and who you are, the link things. What is next? I mean, more of the same? Would you be happy doing this for the next 15 years? Do you see something bigger and grander? Would you like to follow the music dream? What sits in that space?
I think that's really hard. I've sort of been contemplating that myself. I mean, I'm really happy with where I am now, but I guess that the operative word is now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as long as I feel like there is growth in what I'm doing, that I'm learning and I'm adding to my skill set, and that I'm not stagnating in what I'm doing, then I'll be fulfilled. And that as my basic foundation for professional happiness or whatever,
is
leaves the direction very vague, and that's on purpose, I think. If I end up 5 years, I might end up as a real estate agent. Who knows? But as long as I felt like that I'd grown from the person that I was 5 years ago, then I'd still be happy with myself.
Yeah, so it's so really, because I had this kind of question in my mind about, and I kind of mentioned it before about whether you make opportunities and whether you wait for them to happen.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems to me that you're relatively open to them, and you're quite active in that too.
Yeah.
But of course, you're not going to stray away from something that you really love at the moment.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that should the environment, what have you, change, and I'm not talking about moving from Canberra, but other opportunities, another day, whatever, you'd be open to that because you're.
I think it's like a bit of column A, a bit of column B. Like you've got to be proactive in the face of stagnation and being idle, but then also reflexive and happy to just potter along when things are going well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, things are going well and I'm still tracking to where I want to go. So, contentedness, being content with where you are right now.
Who do you look up to? Like, what's your...
I'm looking at him right now.
I was actually going to make that joke, but then I kind of thought people can't see our face expressions. And I think this guy's really up himself. But in terms of your professional and personal life, is there people or agencies or anybody that you look up that you kind of go, they're doing this right, I kind of like that path, I might take some influence from that?
I don't know. I guess I'm not someone that looks at particular people. I think I just look at examples.
Yeah, right.
So when I read journals or I read, it's generally, at least right now, the people and things that I admire generally has to do with risk taking. It's when you have the conviction to do something at the risk of failure.
Yep.
Not playing it safe. And that's probably the next step for me. Like now that I feel comfortable and established in my role as a professional communicator, taking bigger risks is sort of the next step that I see, because the people, generally in a professional way, the people that take risks are the ones that have the experience to back it up, and no one's going to let you take a risk if you're just, if you're entry level. So I think that's I'm staring down the barrel of that, and I'm keen to take some risks of my own, whether it be with ad campaigns or the way that we market events or the way that we design events. And so a lot of it has to do with I admire and I look up to people that take that do a lot of out of box thinking, that are taking professional risks to try something. And also, I also admire people that if it doesn't work out, just admitting, hey, didn't work out. Look, I took a risk. This is how it would have gone if it worked out, but it didn't. We learned something.
Of course. And so no regrets.
And that's the scariest thing, like being able to take that risk, because that, when it goes wrong, that's why people don't want to do it.
And they would track back to the safe option. So would I be right if and I didn't want to do the marketing thing here on you, but would I be right if I summarized it that your kind of motto, maybe an unspoken one, in terms of sentiment for you, where you are currently now, is to be braver?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. To be braver. Yeah, that's a really good one, actually.
Thank you.
That's
I get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is, and I'll just reflect on me, I think the principle that I tend to work for is around having a point of distinction. And I don't mean about being different from everybody else, but rather the pursuits that I undertake, that they have something to them that has an element of uniqueness, that there is a little bit different to the norm. One of the very reasons for this podcast starting up is I haven't found a conversation such as this about careers that isn't just about the career, but rather the psychology and the development behind it. And I kind of thought, well, I've got so many people that are interesting around me. Why don't I try it? And of course, Canberra community is nice and tight, despite the fact that it's 100,000.
That's why I love it.
It's very connected, and I think through that, it'll be very interesting to discover about how people get there. So, but anyway, it's that kind of element of distinction, and I can quite honestly say that, and I use that quite often in different things. Yeah. For you, it kind of seems like that bravery is the next step.
To be braver. I mean, like, I would happily say that I'm quite a good marketer, but I'm not, right now, I'm not an innovator, like I do my job really well, but I'm not, at the very least I would, my professional aspirations are to have some innovations of my own, and a lot of that comes with the risk taking. So, I guess that to be braver.
Yeah, nice. I should get that framed for you.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna get that tattooed next to my Phantom mask.
Don't, because it might change. Eventually,
but I've got to take a risk.
Oh, okay, that's true. The next thing you know, you'll be on one of those ink shows where they have to change your work to something else. One thing that I want to ask, and maybe this is showing my thinking in terms of my life stage and everything else, but do you think there'll be ever a moment where, rather than kind of pursuing all these things and running towards this kind of line, there'll be a moment where you kind of gone, I'm done, and now I'm just going to kick back? Is there an end goal to all of this? I guess that's what my question is.
I guess the question is, well, at least what is done? Is it done because I'm absolutely burnt out and I need a break, or I need a sabbatical? Is it done because I feel idle, or is it done because I just feel like I've done all that I can do? I would like to hope that there is no done, for me, at least. I'm very much always wanting to be on the go. I could think of nothing worse than just sitting on the front porch in my rocking chair, looking out and shaking my fist at the kids playing in the yard. I don't ever want to be done, and I don't think, as long as there's another day to live, there is no real done. I mean, obviously there's points at which I'm happy with the successes that I've achieved, but that, if anything, right now, with every goal that I kick, it just makes me hungry to kick more. So I don't want to be done.
Yeah,
just want to keep doing.
So kicking the ball and doing it bravely. We're kind of almost at the end, and one thing that I thought it might be fun to finish up on is, at some point, obviously, we're talking about how you've been here for over a decade, which makes you a Canberran. I thought this is an interesting point. I tend to find that with a lot of Canberrans, and I guess through my work and all the contacts and all the things that you and I kind of dabble in as well, you get a sense of what Canberra is and isn't proud about, right? Yeah. And I kind of get the feeling that Canberra's has gone through an amazing bit of change in the last 10 years, specifically in the last 5, right? You can just feel it. There's this energy, and it's really exciting, which is just great. And a lot of Canberrans have this slight love-hate thing going on. You know? People complain about the cold, you happen to love it, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of Canberra, obviously it's been a place of opportunity for you and all the rest of it. And I think you feel quite at home here and quite tied to it. Where do you see this place going in the next 10 years? I don't, mean so much in terms of the infrastructure or even politics or anything, but from a cultural perspective and what you work in, what do you think is going to happen as we have a bigger population? I think we're set obviously to grow in the 10 years quite substantially. What do you think that'll bring with it in terms of the cultural scene of this place? I
mean, I think at any point in time that I've been here in Canberra, the cultural scene has always batted well above its average. Mm-hmm. There's always more things on for the amount of people that are here. But I think as we grow, what's changing is that we're getting better at selling it, and that it's also, but that we're also attracting people from outside in. Yeah. The perception of Canberra is changing, and
for the people that are here, or do you mean externally?
Both. Yeah. I think it's becoming cooler and cooler to be proud of Canberra, which is great.
Hence your T-shirt.
Hence my T-shirt.
Straight out of Canberra.
And I love nothing more than wearing my Skywell pin, or or buying a Canberra region wine. And it actually comes back a lot to placemaking, because it's about creating a meaningful connection between people and places, and that just boils down to a sense of belonging. When you might not think that the city is perfect, but if you feel like you belong, then that's what connects you to where you're living. And I definitely feel that with Canberra. I think as we grow, we're just getting better at marketing Canberra, and it's cooler and it's getting easier to be proud of Canberra. And that is going to have an uncountable amount of positive flow-on effects.
Yeah. But for generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. And you're right. I guess, where I was also thinking too, that a lot of cultural events, even if they're not your bag, end up gluing people together. And, I don't want to overuse the word community because that's kind of a bit given, but it does create a specific kind of social glue to a place, you know, even in the understanding that we've got a variety of different things to go to and experience, and we're actually quite rich in that respect. Which is, I think, where the benefit lies in this place growing and all the rest of it.
I mean, I would almost say that a community is strongest not when you all like the same thing, but more when you respect each other's differences.
That's really nicely put. Yeah. And if there's any place that can do it, Canberra definitely could with this progressive approach.
Hashtag yes we can.
Yes we can, bro. Well, Michael, I'd like to thank you. It's been a great chat, and it's been great to have you as my first guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to do this again in 5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm super brave.
Yeah, well, if people keep on listening, we just might have another one of these. So no, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. If you want to do a quick plug, if people want to get to know you across, or get in touch, or across social, what have you, what should they type in somewhere?
For my music stuff, there's facebook.com/Mr. Michael Music. Otherwise, you can probably just find me on LinkedIn, Michael Liu. And look, a quick Google search will pick me up. I'm always happy to have a conversation, especially if it's about Canberra or something creative, some interesting creative pursuit that you have. I'm always here.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Till next time.
Awesome. Cheers.